Hello, friends. Today we will explore the practice of fasting and look into the development of the Lenten tradition over the centuries. We will examine the transformations in rules and observances, seeing the changes from strict practices in the Middle Ages to the contemporary mandatory fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Please like and subscribe and share in the comments how you will spend the next Lenten period. Fasting in the early Christian period. Fasting was not unknown in the pre-Christian Jewish traditions, and early Christians adopted fasting as a spiritual discipline in their daily lives. Fasting served multiple purposes, including preparation for baptism, expressing grief for Jesus' death, and enhancing resistance to temptation. Both Western and Eastern Church Fathers advocated fasting as a form of penance during this period. The Didache, a first-century document handing down the teachings of the apostles, provided guidance on fasting. Christians of this time observed fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays, linking these practices to the remembrance of Judas's betrayal and Christ's crucifixion. Development of liturgical seasons. As the liturgical calendar took shape in the first centuries, specific periods were appointed for fasting and penance. Over time, the Western Church established the penitential season of Lent. Although its Latin name, Quadragesima, translates to the 40th day, the term Lent was adopted by the Anglo-Saxons from the Germanic word for the spring season. The practice of fasting before Easter had ancient roots within the Church, found in the works of Eusebius and the early Christian legal treatise Didascalia. However, the tradition of a 40-day fasting period before Easter can be traced back to the 4th century. In 339 AD, St. Athanasius traveled from Alexandria to Rome. During his journey, he encountered a 40-day fasting practice in preparation for Easter, which he found good for personal penance. Upon his return to Alexandria, Athanasius adopted this practice in his hometown. The tradition of fasting for 40 days before Easter serves as a reminder of three significant events: the 40 years of Moses and the Israelites in the desert, the 40 days Jesus spent in the desert facing temptation from Satan, and the approximately 40 hours that Jesus lay in the tomb before his resurrection. Lent reminds us that we are pilgrims in a foreign land, in a desert of temptation and death. If we keep our eyes on God and His heavenly kingdom, we will one day enter the promised land in the heavenly kingdom. Fasting in the Middle Ages. In the 13th century, St. Thomas Aquinas documented the medieval Lenten tradition. Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, marking the beginning and ending of the Lenten season, were considered black fast days. On these days, only one meal after sunset was permitted, consisting of bread, herbs, and water. The remaining days of Lent were less strict, allowing food consumption after 3 p.m. This practice served as a reminder of the crucifixion of Christ, which occurred during this period. Throughout Lent, the consumption of meat, animal fats, dairy products, and eggs was strictly prohibited. Thomas Aquinas explains the Christian practice of abstaining from meat during Lent. It reflects Jesus Christ sacrificing his flesh for us. While the general prohibition included dairy products of all kinds, historical records from 9th century Germany tell us about exceptions from this rule. People were permitted to consume dairy in exchange for good works or contributions to a pious work, known as butter letters. Some churches, such as the Butter Tower of Rouen Cathedral in France, were partially funded and constructed through the proceeds of these butter letters. The origin of the tradition of Easter eggs can be traced back to this period. Children would gather eggs during this time, boiling and painting them in preparation for the Easter celebration. Shrove Tuesday, also known as Pancake Tuesday, and occurring on the day before the start of Lent on Ash Wednesday, serves as a traditional time to use up any remaining eggs and milk in the household. In an event known as the Affair of the Sausages, the Swiss Protestant Huldrych Zwingli left an indelible mark in the history of Christianity. In March 1522, during the Lenten period, he attended a gathering at his friend Christoph Froschauer's place, a Protestant printer in Zurich. Despite the Lenten restrictions, the guests ate sausages. Although Zwingli refrained from eating the sausages himself, he later defended his friend in a sermon titled "Regarding the Choice and Freedom of Foods." Zwingli argued that Lent should be a matter of individual choice, while he criticized the disciplinary approach maintained by the Catholic Church. This incident gained significant attention, leading to a notable number of Swiss people falling away from true faith and religious allegiance among many who followed Zwingli. The impact of the sausage affair was later compared with the impact of the 95 Theses written by Martin Luther in Germany in 1517. In 1769, Pope Clement XIII issued an encyclical titled Appetente Sacro on the spiritual advantages in fasting. In this writing, the Pope explained the spiritual value of fasting, which is a suitable means of strengthening oneself against temptation. He called on the bishops to make the spiritual benefits of fasting known to the faithful and to teach them the meaning of fasting. Acts of penance alone do not remove the attachment to sin. Rather, the faithful must reflect on the past and avoid falling back into the same sins. The encyclical makes clear that repentance and fasting are intrinsically linked. Changes in the 20th century. The 1917 Code of Canon Law listed the 40 days of Lent as obligatory fasting days. Partial abstinence, the eating of meat only at the principal meal, was obligatory during all weeks of Lent. However, this would change completely within the following 50 years. In 1917, Pope Benedict XV provided the faithful in World War I countries with the option to shift the Lenten abstinence traditionally observed on Saturdays to any other day of the week, excluding Friday and Ash Wednesday. In 1941, during World War II, Pope Pius XII granted bishops across the world the authority to entirely exempt the faithful from fasting and abstinence, with the exception of Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. The most significant shift in contemporary Lenten practices occurred after the Second Vatican Council. In 1966, Pope Paul VI issued an apostolic constitution named Pei Enitemini. This marked a reduction in mandatory fasting days from the entire 40 days of Lent to only Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. The Apostolic Constitution allowed episcopal conferences to substitute abstinence and fasting with alternative forms of penitence, such as charity and piety. Pope Paul VI also recommended replacing fasting and abstinence with prayer and charitable acts in countries where the standard of living is lower, aiming to make Lenten observance easier in regions with different traditions and exhausting living conditions. Following this change, only 2 fasting days remained officially mandatory: Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. The document further explained that while fasting for the entire 40 days of Lent is still highly recommended, it is no longer obligatory under the threat of grave sin. These reforms aimed to make the Catholic Church's practices more accessible and adaptable to changing cultural and social situations. The changes to Lenten observances reflected a wish to encourage a more intentional and spiritually meaningful engagement with penitential activities, focusing on the spirit of the Lenten season rather than rigorous legalistic restrictions. Many traditionally minded Catholics are dissatisfied with these changes and see them as a deviation from the ancient norms and a lessening of the discipline connected with Lenten devotion. For some, the elimination of required fasting days and more flexibility in penitential activities represent a departure from the old rules that were traditionally deemed essential to the Lenten period. Despite the times of change, Catholics have the ability to renew a private culture of fasting and penance in their life. Regardless of official formal regulations, embracing a personal Lenten season can be a powerful and private expression of one's spiritual commitment. Be encouraged to find the right way of fasting and penance during the season of Lent, to come closer to God and to live according to His will. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Follow this channel for more videos and write your thoughts in the comment section below. God bless.